My mother-in-law paid a private detective to trail me for 6 months. Okay, buckle up, because I'm about to tell you a story that still makes my blood run cold. Have you ever been so utterly betrayed by someone you loved that you actually started to hate them? Because for years my husband stood by and watched his own mother try to destroy my life, until it finally broke me. I've been married to Marco for 4 years now. We met in Columbus back in 2019 through mutual friends. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, did the whole thing. And honestly, he's a good man in so many ways. I really do love him. But his mother, Angela, has hated me from the absolute second she first laid eyes on me. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being dramatic. I mean, I watched it happen. Marco brought me to Sunday dinner for the first time, and her face just changed. She went from this warm, smiling woman greeting her son, to looking at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. A piece of trash she needed to scrape off. The thing is, Marco always made excuses for her. She's protective. She's old-fashioned. She just needs time to warm up to you. She had a hard time when his dad left. She sacrificed everything for him growing up. I heard every single excuse in the book. And for the first couple of years I really truly tried. I brought her flowers. I helped clean up after dinners. I complimented her cooking, even when she deliberately made dishes I couldn't eat because of my allergies. I smiled through every single comment about my weight, my clothes, my hair, the fact that I didn't go to church, my family, where I grew up. Literally everything about me was wrong in her eyes. But I kept trying because I loved Marco. And I foolishly thought eventually she'd see I wasn't going anywhere. She'd accept me. God, that was stupid. I know that now. The real problem started about 18 months ago. We'd been married for 2.5 years at that point. I'd given up on Angela ever liking me, but we'd reached this kind of cold peace. She was civil to my face, and I just stayed out of her way as much as possible. Marco seemed relieved that we weren't actively fighting, and he never pushed for more. That should have been my first clue that something was deeply wrong. Because Angela doesn't do peaceful coexistence. Angela does control. It was around September when I started noticing things. This silver sedan. It was parked on our street a lot. Different spots, but always within view of our house. At first I just thought, oh, maybe someone has visitors. Or a new neighbor or something. Our neighborhood is pretty quiet, mostly young families and retirees. But then, I started seeing it other places. In the grocery store parking lot. Parked a few spaces down when I went to get my nails done with my sister, Emmy. Outside the restaurant when I met my college friend, Karina, for lunch. I told Marco about it. He just said I was being paranoid. That it was probably just a coincidence. Columbus isn't that big, he'd say. People's paths cross. And I wanted to believe him. Because the alternative was insane, right? Who would be following me? For what reason? But the feeling it gnawed at me. Then one afternoon I was at the farmer's market downtown, picking up some stuff for dinner, and I saw the sedan again. Same car. Same spot it always seemed to claim near entrances. I was so tired of feeling crazy, of second-guessing myself, of Marco looking at me like I was losing my mind every time I mentioned this car. So I walked right up to it. There was a guy sitting inside, middle-aged, reading something on his phone. When he saw me coming, he looked startled. And that right there told me everything I needed to know. I knocked on his window and I asked him directly why he was following me. And you know what he did? He tried to drive away. Like actually put the car in reverse and started backing out while I was still standing there. I had to jump back to avoid getting my feet run over. I got his license plate, but more importantly I got a good look at his face. Gray hair, maybe late 40s, a little heavyset, wearing a polo shirt. I stood there shaking, pulling out my phone, and snapped a picture of him through the back window as he drove off. It wasn't perfect, but you could see his face clearly enough. When Marco came home that night, I told him everything. I showed him the picture, described the guy, told him about all the times I'd seen this car. And his reaction? To ask if I'd been sleeping okay lately, if I was stressed about work, if maybe I should talk to someone about my anxiety. I lost it on him. Completely lost it. I screamed that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. Some man had been following me for weeks, and his response was to suggest I needed therapy. He said he was just trying to help, that I was being aggressive, that this was exactly why his mother thought I was difficult to deal with. And that's when I knew. I knew before I even confirmed it. Why would he bring up his mother in the middle of a conversation about me being stalked, unless she was somehow involved? I didn't say anything else that night. I just waited. Let him think I dropped it. The next week, I asked Emmy to help me figure out who this guy was. She came over and we spent hours searching. We Googled Private Investigator Columbus, Ohio, and went through every website we could find. Third page of results, there he was. Robert Castellano, owner of Castellano Investigations. Same gray hair, same heavy face, same everything. His website even bragged about his discreet surveillance services for concerned family members. A private investigator. Someone had hired a private investigator to follow me. Emmy wanted to confront Marco right away. But I said no. I needed to know more. I needed to confirm who hired this guy before I said anything, because if I accused Angela without proof, Marco would just defend her like he always does and nothing would change. I thought about it for days. How could I prove Angela was behind this? I couldn't exactly call the PI and ask who his client was. I couldn't hack into anything. I had no connections. Then it hit me. I didn't need proof before the confrontation. I needed the confrontation to be the proof. If I accused Angela in front of everyone and she denied it convincingly, fine. I'd look paranoid. But if she reacted guilty, if she couldn't deny it, then everyone would see the truth. Sunday came and I was ready. Marco's Aunt Elsa was there. His cousin Terry and Terry's wife. And Angela, of course. We were all sitting around the dining room table, eating this pot roast Angela kept bragging about, and I just waited for the right moment. It came when Angela made some snide comment about how nice it was that I'd finally learned to set the table properly. This passive-aggressive dig about something she criticized me for 4 years ago. I just looked at her and asked her if she knew a man named Robert Castellano. The entire table went quiet. Marco asked what I was talking about. Terry's wife looked confused. But Angela's face went completely white. Like all the blood just drained out of it in a second. I kept going. I pulled out my phone and showed everyone the picture I'd taken at the farmer's market. Asked if anyone recognized him. Then I showed them his website. Private investigator. Surveillance specialist. And I looked right at Angela and asked her how long she'd been paying him to follow me. Angela started crying, saying she was just trying to protect her son. That she knew I was hiding something, that a mother knows these things. She kept talking, kept defending herself, and that's when it came out. She said she'd had to be sure. That she couldn't just sit back and watch. That 6 months wasn't that long when you're trying to protect your child. 6 months. She said it herself. This man had been following me for 6 months. 6 months of my life where someone was watching my every move. Documenting where I went, who I talked to, what I did. 6 months of feeling like I was going crazy while my husband told me I was paranoid. That last part, I knew it was mean when I said it. Angela's ex-husband cheated on her multiple times before he finally left her for his secretary when Marco was in high school. It's why she's so paranoid about infidelity, why she's always been suspicious of me. But I didn't care about being mean anymore. This woman had tried to destroy my marriage. I told everyone at that table exactly what Angela had done. Hired a PI. 6 months of following me. All because she wanted to find proof I was cheating so Marco would divorce me. And she found nothing. Because there was nothing to find. I've never cheated on Marco. I've never even thought about cheating on Marco. I'm not her. I spat. And I saw the instant regret in Marco's eyes, but I couldn't stop. Marco was just sitting there with his mouth open. Like he couldn't process what was happening. Elsa was asking what the hell was going on. Terry's wife looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Marco finally spoke up and asked his mother if it was true. She couldn't even deny it. She just kept crying and saying she did it for him. She did it because she loved him, because she couldn't stand to see him hurt the way his father hurt her. I looked at Marco and asked him what he was going to do about this. His own mother had me stalked for half a year. That's not protective. I yelled. That's not love. That's obsessive and controlling and insane. And do you know what he said? He said she was just worried. That she didn't mean any harm. That she obviously went too far, but her heart was in the right place. I left. I just got up from the table and walked out. Emmy picked me up because I couldn't even drive. I was shaking so hard. Not from fear, from pure incandescent rage. 6 months of being watched and followed and documented. And my husband's response was that his mother meant well. That was in October. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. That Marco saw reason, that Angela apologized, that we all moved past it. But of course that didn't happen. What happened was Angela decided if she couldn't catch me cheating, she would make evidence that I was cheating. About 3 weeks after the dinner confrontation, Marco came home from work looking like someone had died. He sat me down in the living room and told me his mother had sent him some photos. Photos that showed me with another man at a hotel looking very intimate. I asked to see them. He hesitated but eventually showed me. The photos were of me, all right. My face, my body, clothes I recognized from my own closet. But the man I was supposedly with? I'd never seen him before in my life. And the hotel in the background? One I'd never been to. And when I looked closely, really closely, I could see it. The shadows were wrong. The lighting didn't match. My face was just slightly off from the angle it should have been. They were photoshopped. Angela had taken photos of me, probably from the surveillance or from social media, and edited them to look like I was cheating. I showed Marco. I pointed out every inconsistency, every tell. I asked him if he really thought I would be stupid enough to go to a hotel with another man in broad daylight, wearing recognizable clothes. I asked him if he really thought so little of me that he'd believe obviously manipulated photos from a woman who had already proven she would do anything to break us up. Marco sat there for a long time. Then he said he believed me, that he could see now that the photos were fake, that his mother had gone too far this time. I thought, okay, finally, he's seeing her for what she is. Then he said he was going to talk to her, explain that what she did was wrong, help her understand that she can't keep doing this. Talk to her like she was a child who needed to learn a lesson, and not a grown woman who had deliberately fabricated evidence to destroy her son's marriage. I told him talking wasn't good enough. She needed to apologize to me directly. She needed to admit what she'd done to the whole family, like I'd been humiliated at that dinner table. And if she couldn't do that, then I wanted him to cut contact with her. Marco said he couldn't cut off his own mother. That yes, she'd made mistakes, but she's still his mom. That she's all the family he has left since his dad took off. That I was asking too much. I told him his mother had me stalked for 6 months and then tried to frame me for cheating when that didn't work. I told him that wasn't mistakes. That was a campaign. I told him I was his wife, and if he couldn't choose me over someone actively trying to destroy our marriage, then maybe we didn't have a marriage worth saving. We fought about it for weeks. Marco kept trying to find some middle ground, some compromise where he could keep his mother in his life without me having to accept her behavior. He suggested therapy for Angela. He suggested limited contact. He even suggested I was overreacting because I'd never had a complicated relationship with my own family, so I didn't understand. And through it all, Angela kept texting him, calling him, showing up at our house when I wasn't home. Always playing the victim, always crying about how she was losing her son, how I was turning him against her. Never once did she apologize to me. Never once did she admit she was wrong. Thanksgiving was a disaster. I refused to go to Angela's house, and Marco went without me. Christmas I spent with Emmy and my parents while Marco split his time between us and Angela. By New Year's, I was seriously considering divorce. Then, in February of this year, something else happened. Something that made the PI and the fake photos look like nothing. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize while I was at work. When I answered, it was a woman identifying herself as being from Child Protective Services. She said they'd received a report about our household and needed to schedule a home visit. I asked what kind of report. She said they'd received an anonymous tip alleging child abuse and neglect. We don't have children, I told her. Told her we'd been trying actually, but hadn't been successful yet. She seemed confused, said the report specifically mentioned a toddler in the home, gave details about unsafe conditions and suspected physical abuse. Someone had called CPS and filed a completely false report about children that don't exist. I knew immediately who it was. There was only one person unhinged enough to do something like this. One person who would do literally anything to tear my marriage apart. I asked the woman from CPS if she could tell me anything about who filed the report. She said it was anonymous, but they still had to investigate all tips. Even though we didn't have children, they would need to send someone to verify that and close out the case. A week later, an investigator came to our house, looked around, confirmed that yes, there were no children living here, asked some questions about our situation. I had to explain everything. The stalking, the fake photos, the whole nightmare. The investigator was sympathetic, but said they had to follow up on all reports regardless. I filed a police report not because I thought they would do anything but because I wanted documentation. The officer I spoke to said false CPS reports are technically illegal, but almost impossible to prove without a confession. They said they'd look into it, but I could tell nothing was going to happen. I confronted Angela directly that time. Didn't even tell Marco first. Just drove to her house and rang the doorbell. When she opened the door, I asked her if she was proud of herself. If calling CPS with false reports made her feel powerful. If she understood that filing false reports is a crime, and that she could actually face consequences for it. She denied it, of course. Said she had no idea what I was talking about. Said, maybe one of our neighbors had concerns. Said, I couldn't prove anything. Then she smiled at me. This little smug smile that made me want to. Well, I'm not going to finish that sentence, but you can probably imagine. I told her I was done. That I was going to do whatever it took to protect myself from her. That if she came near me again, if she tried anything else, I would make her regret it. She told me I was the problem in Marco's life. That before me, he was happy and close to his family, and now she barely sees him. That I'd isolated him from everyone who loved him. That I was manipulative and controlling and she could see right through me, even if Marco couldn't. I laughed in her face. Literally laughed, because the projection was so incredible I couldn't even respond to it. This woman who had hired someone to stalk me was calling me controlling. I left and drove home and told Marco everything. The CPS call, the investigation, confronting his mother. And he had the nerve, the actual nerve, to say I shouldn't have gone over there alone, that I was escalating things. That now his mother was going to feel attacked, and it would be even harder to fix things between us. I asked him what exactly there was left to fix. His mother had tried to prove I was cheating. When that failed, she tried to frame me. When that failed, she called CPS with false reports. What was next? What would it take for him to finally see that this woman was dangerous? He said I was being dramatic. That dangerous was a strong word. That yes, his mother had made serious mistakes, but she wasn't dangerous. She was just a lonely woman who was afraid of losing her son. That was last month. We're still married. Marco is still in contact with his mother. And yesterday I found a new scratch down the entire length of my car's driver's side door. This is the third time my car has been keyed since December. Always when it's parked at the house. Always when Marco is at work and I'm home alone. There are no security cameras on our street, so I can't prove who's doing it, but I know. I know it's her. I told Marco about the car. He said it was probably kids from the neighborhood. Suggested I park in the garage from now on. Our garage is full of his stuff. There's no room for my car. I asked if we could clear it out so I could park inside. He said he'd get to it when he had time. So here I am, married to a man who refuses to protect me from his own mother. Living in a house where my car gets vandalized regularly. Dealing with a woman who has escalated from stalking to fake evidence to CPS reports, and shows no signs of stopping. I don't know what to do anymore. I love Marco, but I'm starting to hate him too. I hate that he can't see what's right in front of him. I hate that he always finds a way to excuse her. I hate that I've become this angry, bitter person who can't even enjoy my own marriage because I'm constantly waiting for the next attack. Emmy says I should leave. My parents say I should leave. Karina says I should at least talk to a lawyer. But every time I think about actually doing it, I remember the man I fell in love with. And I think maybe if I just try harder, explain better, he'll finally understand. But that's how I ended up here, isn't it? Trying harder, explaining better, and nothing changing. I'll update if anything else happens. At this point, I'm expecting it. So, after my last post, things were tense. Marco and I were barely talking, except for necessary stuff like who was picking up groceries or what time he'd be home from work. He'd even started sleeping on the couch some nights, because every conversation turned into the same fight. Me saying his mother was terrorizing me. Him saying I was being dramatic and refusing to see her side. We just kept going in circles until we were both too exhausted to continue. About a week after that, I came home from running errands and my neighbor Julia was outside watering her plants. Julia and I have always been friendly. Not like best friends or anything, but we chat when we saw each other. She'd bring over cookies at Christmas, that kind of thing. Nice woman, maybe mid-50s, been in the neighborhood forever. So I waved at her like I always do and she just turned away. Didn't wave back, didn't say hi, just straight up turned her back to me and went inside. I stood there in my driveway feeling like I'd been slapped. Julia and I had never had any problems. We'd literally had a conversation like 2 weeks before about her daughter's wedding coming up. And now she was acting like I didn't exist. I told myself, maybe she was having a bad day. People have bad days. Not everything is about me. Then it happened again with our other neighbor Steven, who lives 2 houses down. I was getting the mail and he was walking his dog, and he crossed to the other side of the street when he saw me. Like, actually crossed the street to avoid walking past me. By the 3rd time it happened, this time with a woman from a few blocks over who I'd see sometimes at the little park near our house, I knew something was going on. People don't just randomly start avoiding you for no reason. I asked Marco if he'd noticed anything weird with the neighbors. He said no. Why would he? He's barely home during the day. I told him about Julia and Steven and the woman from the park, and he did that thing he does where he sighs like I'm being exhausting and said, maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe I was looking for problems where there weren't any. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But I just walked away because I was so tired of having the same conversation where I tell him something is wrong, and he tells me I'm imagining it. Emmy came over that weekend, and I told her everything. She got this look on her face, the one she gets when she's about to do something that might be a bad idea, but she's going to do it anyway. She said she was going to talk to Julia. I told her not to, that it would be weird, that I should just let it go. She ignored me completely and marched right over to Julia's house. I watched from my living room window like a total creep while Emmy knocked on Julia's door. They talked for maybe 10 minutes. I couldn't hear anything, obviously, but I could see Emmy's body language getting more and more tense. When she came back, she looked ready to commit murder. Angela had been talking to the neighbors. Not just talking, spreading stories. According to Julia, Angela had been coming around the neighborhood for weeks, telling anyone who would listen that I was unstable, that I'd been having affairs, that I was trying to take Marco for everything he had in a divorce, that I'd threatened her and she was afraid for her safety. Julia told Emmy she didn't want to get involved in drama, but she thought I should know what was being said. And oh, by the way, Angela had mentioned that I had substance abuse problems, and that's why Marco's family was so worried about me. Substance abuse. I don't even drink more than like a glass of wine at dinner sometimes. I've never done drugs in my life, but now my entire neighborhood thinks I'm some kind of addict cheater who threatens old women. I waited for Marco to get home. I sat in the living room with the lights off, just waiting. When he walked in and turned on the light and saw me sitting there, he actually jumped. Asked what the hell I was doing sitting in the dark. I told him about the neighbors, about what Angela had been telling them about the substance abuse lie and the affair lies and the threats lie. I told him his mother had been conducting a whisper campaign against me in our own neighborhood, the place where we live, where we're supposed to feel safe. And you know what Marco said? You know what his response was to finding out his mother had been destroying my reputation to everyone we live near? He said maybe she was just venting, that she'd been upset about how I confronted her, and maybe she'd exaggerated to some people and it got out of hand, that he would talk to her about it. She told people I'm a drug addict, and he called it venting. I lost it. I completely lost it. I told him I was done with his excuses, done with him minimizing everything she did. Done with him choosing her over me again and again and again. I told him his mother was not just protective. She was not just worried. She was malicious. She wanted to destroy me, and he was letting her do it. Marco got angry. Then, he started saying that I didn't understand what it was like growing up with just his mom. How hard she worked to give him everything. How much she sacrificed. He said his dad abandoned them when he was 15, and his mom was all he had for years. And I couldn't just expect him to throw her away like she meant nothing. I told him I wasn't asking him to throw her away. I was asking him to protect me, his wife, the woman he promised to love and cherish and all that. I was asking him to set one boundary with her, just one. And he couldn't even do that. He said I didn't make it easy. That every time I talked about his mother, it was with so much hatred and anger that it put him on the defensive. That maybe if I tried to understand her perspective instead of just attacking her all the time, he could be more supportive. I asked him what perspective I was supposed to understand. The perspective of hiring a PI to stalk me? The perspective of photoshopping pictures to frame me for cheating? The perspective of filing false CPS reports? He just stood there with his jaw clenched, looking at the floor. I told him I wanted him to go to her house right then, that night, and tell her that if she ever spoke to another neighbor about me, if she ever said my name to anyone in this neighborhood again, there would be consequences. Real consequences. He asked what kind of consequences. I said I didn't know yet, but I was done being her punching bag, and if he wouldn't defend me, I would defend myself. He went. I don't know what they talked about because he didn't tell me and I didn't ask. He came back 2 hours later looking drained and said it was handled. That his mother understood she'd gone too far with the neighbor stuff and she would stop. I didn't believe him, but I was too tired to fight anymore that night. Things were quiet for maybe a week. Then Emmy called me. She asked if I was sitting down. I told her just to tell me whatever it was. She'd run into Elsa, Marco's aunt, at a Kroger near her house. They'd ended up talking in the parking lot for almost an hour. And Elsa had told her some things about Angela that I'd never heard before. When Marco was in college, he dated a girl for almost 2 years. Pretty serious. They'd even talked about getting engaged. And Angela had hated her just like she hated me. And she'd done things to try to break them up too. Not as extreme as what she'd done to me, but a similar playbook. Showing up unannounced, making comments about the girlfriend's family, telling Marco she had a bad feeling about her. They broke up eventually. Marco told everyone it was mutual, they'd grown apart, wanted different things. But according to Elsa, the real reason was that Angela had convinced Marco his girlfriend was only with him for money. That she'd overheard the girlfriend talking about Marco's future earning potential, and how that was important to her. Marco confronted the girlfriend. She denied it. He believed his mother anyway. Elsa said she'd always felt guilty about not saying something at the time. She'd seen what Angela was doing, but she didn't want to get in the middle of family drama. She said she thought about reaching out to me several times after the dinner confrontation, but Angela was her sister, and she didn't know how to navigate it. I didn't tell Marco what Elsa said. I don't know why. Maybe because I knew he would just get defensive or make excuses or find some way to explain it away. Or maybe because I was starting to realize that no amount of evidence was ever going to change how he saw his mother. The next incident happened at a gas station of all places. I was filling up my car, and this woman I'd never seen before walked up to me and asked if I was Marco's wife. When I said yes, she said she was Angela's friend from church, and she just wanted me to know that she was praying for me. I asked her what she meant by that. She said Angela had told her everything about my problems, about how I'd been struggling, about how Angela was trying so hard to help me, but I kept pushing her away. She said addiction was a disease and there was no shame in getting help. I stood there at the gas pump while this stranger told me about my supposed addiction and Angela's supposed efforts to help me, and I just couldn't even respond. The woman patted my arm in a sympathetic way and walked off, and I finished pumping my gas and got in my car and sat there for 20 minutes. Angela wasn't just telling the neighbors. She was telling her church, her friends, God knows who else. Building this narrative where she was the concerned mother-in-law trying to help her troubled daughter-in-law, painting herself as the victim of my aggression while assassinating my character to anyone who would listen. I drove straight to Angela's house. I know I probably shouldn't have. I know it would just give her more ammunition to claim I was harassing her or whatever, but I was beyond caring about strategy at that point. She answered the door looking surprised to see me. I didn't wait for her to say anything. I walked right past her into her living room and turned around and asked her what exactly she was trying to accomplish. She started with the innocent act. What was I talking about? She had no idea what I meant. I really needed to calm down. I told her about the woman at the gas station, about the prayer offer, about the addiction story being spread at her church now. She told me she hadn't said anything that wasn't true, that I was clearly struggling. Anyone could see that. That my behavior lately had been erratic and aggressive, and Marco was worried about me, even if he wouldn't admit it. I asked her if she actually believed that, or if she was just that committed to the lie. She said it wasn't a lie. She said I had isolated Marco from his family, that he barely called her anymore, that he'd missed 3 Sunday dinners in a row. She said before me he was such a good son, so attentive, so loving, and now she was lucky if she got a text from him once a week. I told her that wasn't isolation, That was her son being married and having his own life, and maybe not wanting to spend every Sunday watching his mother criticize his wife. She laughed at that. She said, "You really thought you were special, didn't you?" She said she'd seen girls like me before. Girls who swoop in and try to steal sons from their mothers. She said I might have Marco fooled for now, but eventually he would see me for what I really was. I asked what I really was according to her. She said I was a manipulator, a liar, that I trapped Marco into marrying me, and now I was trying to cut off everyone who could show him the truth. She said she knew about the fake photos I'd accused her of making, and she hadn't made them. She'd received them from someone who cared about Marco and was trying to help him see. She said she didn't know who took them, but she believed they were real. I couldn't even argue anymore, because I realized I was dealing with someone who had constructed an entire alternative reality in her head, where she was the good guy, and I was the villain. She genuinely believed, or at least had convinced herself she believed, that I was this terrible person doing terrible things to her precious son. I told her to stay away from me, stay away from my house, stay away from my car, stay away from my neighbors and her church friends and anyone else she might want to spread her lies to. I told her if she didn't stop, I would explore every legal option available to me. I left. There was nothing else to say. When I got home, Marco was there. He'd gotten off work early for some reason. He took one look at my face and asked where I'd been. I told him all of it. Marco sat down on the couch and put his head in his hands. He stayed like that for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. He said he was tired, that he felt like he was being torn in half, that he loved me and he loved his mother, and every day felt like he was failing both of us. He said he didn't know what to do anymore, that every choice felt wrong, that he just wanted everyone to get along, and he knew that was impossible, but he didn't know how else to think about it. For a second I felt sorry for him. He did look exhausted, beaten down, like a man who genuinely didn't know which way to turn. I told Marco this wasn't about getting along. This was about his mother actively trying to destroy me and him standing by and watching it happen. I told him I wasn't asking him to hate her or never see her again. I was asking him to tell her clearly that there would be consequences if she didn't stop. Real consequences, not another talk, not another "please mom, try to be nicer." Actual consequences. He asked what that would even look like. I said I didn't know, but we needed to figure it out together, because I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for the next attack, wondering what she was saying about me now and to who, dreading every interaction with neighbors or strangers. My mental health was suffering. My ability to trust anyone was suffering. My marriage was suffering. He said okay. He said he heard me. He said we would figure something out. I wanted to believe him. I really did. 2 days later was the incident that finally pushed me over the edge. The thing that made me realize talking and hoping and waiting wasn't going to cut it anymore. I came home from being at Emmy's house to find Angela standing in my driveway, just standing there waiting. My car was in the street because Marco still hadn't cleared the garage, and she was standing right in the middle of the driveway, blocking me from pulling in. I parked on the street and got out. Asked her what she was doing there. She said she wanted to talk woman to woman, without Marco in the middle. She said she'd been thinking about what I said at her house, and she realized we needed to clear the air. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to go inside and lock the door. But part of me thought, maybe this is it. Maybe she'd finally realized how far she'd gone. Maybe there was actually going to be a conversation that ended in something other than her playing victim. We stood in the driveway. She didn't want to come inside. And honestly, I didn't want her in my house either. She started by saying she knew things had gotten out of hand, that she'd done some things she regretted, that she never meant to hurt me. She was just trying to protect her son. I waited for the but because with Angela there was always a but. The but came. She said. But I had to understand where she was coming from. That I'd come into Marco's life and changed everything. That he used to call her every day, and now she was lucky to hear from him once a week. That he used to come to Sunday dinner every single week, and now it was maybe twice a month. That she used to be the most important woman in his life, and now she felt like she'd been replaced. I told her that's what happens when someone gets married. That Marco was building a life with me, and yes, that meant things with her would change. That didn't make me the enemy. She shook her head like I wasn't getting it. She said, I didn't understand because I'd never lost everything. She said, When Marco's father left, she had nothing. No money, no support, just a teenage son and a bunch of debt. And everyone telling her she should have seen it coming. She said Marco was all she had. He was the only good thing in her life. And watching him slip away was like losing his father all over again. For a moment, just one moment, I saw her as something other than a monster. I saw a woman who'd been abandoned and betrayed, and had poured everything into her son because he was the only safe place she had. A woman who was terrified of being alone again. But that moment passed quickly, because trauma doesn't excuse terrorizing innocent people. Lots of people go through awful things and don't turn into stalkers who fabricate evidence and file false reports. I told her I was sorry for what she went through with Marco's father. I genuinely was. But that didn't give her the right to treat me this way. That I wasn't taking Marco from her. I was just trying to be his wife. There was room for both of us in his life if she could just accept that. She got quiet. Then she said something that I think about every day now. She said there wasn't room. That she'd seen how this worked. The wife always wins. The mother always loses. She'd watched it happen with her own mother-in-law, who'd pushed her out of Marco's father's life. And look how that marriage ended, she sneered. She wasn't going to let that happen to her son. I told her I wasn't her mother-in-law. That our situations were completely different. That I had never tried to push her out. She was the one creating conflict where there didn't need to be any. She looked at me with these eyes and said I was lying to myself. That I knew exactly what I was doing. That maybe I'd even convinced myself I was innocent, but she could see the truth. That's when I realized there was no reaching her. No conversation that was going to change her mind. She had decided I was her enemy years ago, and nothing I said or did would ever change that. I could be the perfect daughter-in-law for the next 50 years, and she would still see me as the woman who stole her son. I told her to leave. She asked if that was a threat. I said, no, it was a request. Please get off my property. She said she wasn't going anywhere until she said what she came to say. And then she told me that she was going to make sure Marco knew exactly who I was. That she would never stop. That she would do whatever it took to save her son from me. That I might have one for now, but she had patience. And she would be there long after I was gone. I walked past her into my house and locked the door. I watched through the window as she stood in my driveway for another 5 minutes, just staring at my house, before she finally got in her car and left. That night I told Marco we needed to take serious action. Not another conversation, not another chance. His mother had come to my house and told me to my face that she would never stop trying to break us up. This wasn't going to end with talking. For the first time ever, Marco didn't argue with me. He just nodded and said, okay, whatever you want to do, I'm with you. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week to discuss my options. Restraining order, harassment charges, whatever might actually have teeth. Emmy is coming with me because I don't trust myself to remember everything. I'll update after the lawyer meeting. I'm hoping there's actually something legal that can be done, because I'm running out of other ideas. Okay, final update. So this is going to be my last update because things finally came to a head, and I have an actual ending to share now. The lawyer meeting happened. Emmy came with me like she promised. The attorney was actually more optimistic than I expected. She said with the evidence I had, a civil harassment restraining order was very doable. I had witnesses from the Sunday dinner who heard Angela admit to hiring the PI. I had the police report from the false CPS call. I had Julia and potentially other neighbors who could testify about Angela spreading lies about me being a drug addict. For a civil restraining order in Ohio, that's more than enough. But then she got real with me. She said Angela would absolutely fight it. That meant depositions, court appearances, potentially months of legal back and forth. Everything would become public record. Angela would hire her own attorney who would try to paint me as the aggressor, the unstable daughter-in-law who was tearing a family apart. She asked me point blank if my marriage could survive that kind of pressure. If Marco would stand by me while I took his mother to court. I didn't have an answer for her. She told me to think about it. Said the legal path was there if I wanted it, but I needed to be prepared for what it would cost me beyond just money. Emmy squeezed my hand and we left. When I got home, Marco was waiting for me. He'd taken the afternoon off work because he wanted to hear what the lawyer said. I told him everything, including the part about whether our marriage could handle me pursuing legal action against his mother. Then he said something that surprised me. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking since Angela showed up at our house that day in the driveway. About what kind of man he wanted to be. About what his marriage vows actually meant. About whether he could keep living with himself if he let this continue. I waited because I'd heard versions of this before, and they never led anywhere. But then he said he'd called his mother that morning. Told her he needed to see her, that it was important. He asked if I would come with him. Not to confront her, not to fight, just to be there while he said what he needed to say. I almost said no. The last thing I wanted was to be in a room with Angela again. But something in Marco's voice made me think this time might actually be different. We drove to Angela's house together. She opened the door looking surprised to see both of us. Marco didn't wait for her to invite us in. He just walked into her living room and sat down on her couch, and I sat next to him. Angela stood there looking between us like she was trying to figure out what was happening. She asked what this was about, and Marco told her to sit down. She sat. And then Marco started talking. He told her he loved her. That he would always love her. That she was his mother, and nothing would ever change that. But he also told her that what she'd been doing to me was wrong. Not misguided, not overprotective, not excessive. Wrong. He said he'd been making excuses for her for years because it was easier than facing the truth. But he couldn't do it anymore. Angela tried to interrupt, tried to defend herself, tried to turn it around on me. But Marco just kept going. He told her about the sleepless nights and the fights and watching me become a shell of the person he married. He told her she wasn't protecting him, she was destroying him. That every time she attacked me, she was attacking his marriage and his happiness and his future. Angela started crying, the real tears this time, not the manipulative ones. She kept saying she just didn't want to lose him. That I didn't understand what it was like to be alone. That she was scared. Marco told her he understood she was scared. He understood she'd been hurt. But her fear didn't give her the right to hurt innocent people. He told her we had just come from a lawyer, and that I had enough evidence to get a restraining order against her. That witnesses had heard her confess. That the police report existed. That neighbors could testify. He said I was choosing not to pursue it right now, but that choice could change if she didn't stop. Angela looked at me with so much hatred I could feel it. She told Marco I'd manipulated him into this, that I turned him against his own mother, that one day he would wake up and realize she was right about me. Marco stood up and told her that was exactly the problem. That she couldn't even hear criticism without blaming me. That she was so convinced I was the enemy that she couldn't see how her own behavior had pushed him away. He told her she had a choice. She could work on herself, maybe see a therapist, learn to let go of some of the fear and anger. Or she could keep doing what she'd been doing. And watch her relationship with her son disappear while also dealing with legal consequences. He said he hoped she would choose the first option, but the choice was hers. Then he took my hand and we left. Angela didn't chase after us. She didn't call or text that night. For the first time in almost 2 years, I fell asleep without dreading what she might do next. That was 3 weeks ago. Angela has reached out a few times since then. Short text to Marco asking if they can talk. He's responded but kept it brief. Said he meant what he said and the ball is in her court. She hasn't apologized to me. I don't think she ever will. But she also hasn't keyed my car or talked to the neighbors or shown up unannounced or done any of the other things she used to do. Maybe she's just regrouping. Maybe she's planning something worse. But for now there's quiet, and I still have the lawyer's number if I need it. Julia from next door even knocked on my door last week to apologize for believing Angela's lies and avoiding me. I don't know what the future holds with Angela. I don't trust her and I probably never will. But I finally have a husband who's willing to put our marriage first, even if it took him way too long to get there. So what do you guys think? What would you have done in my place when Marco was still making excuses? Or what would you have done when Angela showed up in my driveway that last time? I really want to know your thoughts on this.